Hey guys, I wanted to talk today about Pluto conjunct Sun transit. So this is when Pluto is right at the point where the Sun was when you were born. So we would call that Pluto transiting Pluto conjunct natal Sun. And even though the Sun isn't still in that point in the sky, it's moved on, this transit can actually be extremely meaningful. All transits can be really meaningful whenever transiting planets are contacting the points in your natal chart. It can be very meaningful for you and for your life. And this transit is no different. Honestly, I think this transit is one of the most powerful transits a person can have in their life. So I wanted to make a video in case you have this transit coming up, just to spread awareness about it, basically. Because I feel like for this transit particularly, it can be really helpful to have awareness that this is happening for you, because otherwise it might just feel like you are being put through the ringer for no reason for like a few years straight. So anyway, it can just be helpful to have awareness. But this transit in particular is really interesting. And for anyone who has their Sun in Aquarius, because Pluto right now is at the beginning of Aquarius, and it's going to be slowly making its way through Aquarius for the next 20 years or so. So if you do have your Sun in Aquarius, then you're going to have this transit happen to you. So if I were you, I would recommend Googling, exactly the dates that you're going to be having this transit, and you can just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. But let's talk a little bit about what Pluto represents and what the Sun represents, and then I will get into exactly what to expect with this transit. So let's start by talking about the Sun a little bit. I feel like the Sun is, I think all astrologers can agree that the Sun is a very powerful planet, and it's a luminary, which means it illuminates, it shines, and so I guess you could even say it's a little bit different from the other planets. I would say the Sun and the Moon are both luminaries, but I like to think of the Sun as being very connected to our consciousness. I like to think of it as almost representing our conscious awareness. It's kind of like the place in our chart where a light is turned on. And each person has their own consciousness, and consciousness is really what we need. It's critical for our survival, really, because as long as we're alive and we're awake and we're aware of our surroundings, I feel like we're really utilizing our consciousness. So yeah, it's almost like the lens through which we are like interfacing with our reality. We're perceiving our surroundings, we're perceiving ourselves, and I think it's what we use to make a lot of decisions in our life. I think it's more related to our rational mind, whereas the Moon I see being very connected to our subconscious and our emotional mind. And that's a little bit trickier, and it's not as clear all the time. But the Sun, I feel like, is kind of just where we live in our heads almost. So when we have this transit and Pluto is transforming our Sun, it's basically transforming our consciousness, and it's really having an impact on pretty much every area of our life, because the Sun is kind of touching every area of our life. So let's talk a little bit about Pluto. Pluto is an outer planet, and the outer planets weren't even discovered until like kind of recently, in the last couple hundred years. But nonetheless, Pluto is a very powerful planet, and Pluto is all about what's beneath the surface. So Pluto, is related to themes like hidden truths So, things that are kind of brewing underneath that need to be brought to the light. Pluto really hates like inauthenticity or lies, basically. Like Pluto just wants to get to like the bottom of something. Like it wants to know what's going on, and it wants that to kind of be brought to the surface. But Pluto is also connected with the underworld, or like the shadow, because Pluto in mythology was the god of the underworld, I'm pretty sure. So when Pluto is involved in something, you can expect there to also be some issues with like power and control, and you can also expect there to be some sort of like, psychological shadow work present, or maybe trauma that's from the past to kind of be brought to light. It can be uncomfortable, but Pluto is very focused on transformation. So it's a really healing energy in the long run, because it's all about, not staying the same, not staying stagnant. It's about growth. But sometimes this happens through sort of painful cycles of like losses and, metaphorical death and rebirth. Pluto can also be associated with things like, obsession and insecurity. And so again, there is a very like psychological component to Pluto. Okay, so when you combine these two planets, it really feels like Pluto is basically having a hand in your entire life experience, because the sun is really connected to our entire life experience. So yeah, and the sun is all about our consciousness. So this transit will bring a lot of hidden truths to light in our conscious awareness, and then we can sort of take the truth, we can process it, and we can release what is no longer serving us. But Pluto will also do a lot of releasing for us. So that leads me into my first point about what you can expect on this transit, which is you can expect a lot of shedding in your life, a lot of loss, but it's not necessarily it's never loss that isn't meant to happen, basically. And I think sometimes when you're in this transit, you can't see the bigger picture. We don't have all the answers. We don't have the plan, but I guess you could say like the planets do. So yeah, you can expect a lot of shedding, a lot of like releasing and letting go, but it can be painful because losses are painful. So you might find during this transit that you let go of certain friendships. Your inner circle changes a lot. You might find that you let go of habits that are no longer serving you. You might even let go of like pets, or just really anything that is not in alignment with your highest path must go. And sometimes with this transit, it's really out of our control. So things will leave, things will be lost, and it can feel like we aren't in control. It can feel like, all this change is happening that we can't even, we can't control it. So it can, you might experience moments of feeling like powerless to the changes that are happening in your life. But Pluto is kind of like going to like the car wash, basically, and Pluto is like just washing away people and situations, habits, even things with like your physical health, things that just aren't serving your highest good, and they're not meant to come with you in the next chapter of your life. Another thing you can just expect in this transit is just like radical change and transformation. So chances are you will feel like a completely different person with a different life after you finish this transit. And it doesn't have to be like, you know, a really insane thing before and after, but it'll just be like this feeling you get where you just feel like, I'm a different person now. It feels like it's almost like magic, you know, how it happens. But you can just expect a lot of change, basically, a lot of transformation. Another thing you can expect in this transit is you can expect your shadow to be brought into the light a little bit. So what this means is if you have any like shadow tendencies or coping mechanisms that you may have adopted because of trauma in your past, or maybe because of your childhood, or just overall just kind of like unhealthy habits, or maybe just parts of your psyche that you have never faced before, things that are not really serving you well, you can expect for some of that, at least the necessary things, to be kind of brought to the surface. But it could happen in a painful way, because it could happen in a way where you're basically like forced to confront these parts of yourself. Like Pluto is kind of saying, you need to pay attention to this, you need to like work through this, basically. And I've found that oftentimes this can happen in our relationships with other people. You might notice, you might even notice power and control dynamics surfacing, again, for you to work through these themes and these coping mechanisms and maybe these unhealthy patterns, and then releasing them and kind of healing them, basically. So yeah, there's a lot of potential for change and for healing, but it can be really intense to have your trauma basically like brought to the surface. And it can also be kind of unsettling, I think, to have to confront the not so pretty sides of yourself. You know, the sides that are, it makes sense why they're there, why you have these sides to yourself, but having to come face to face with your shadow can be painful. It can even make you feel kind of bad about yourself at times. So it's definitely helpful to be very compassionate with yourself during this transit. And that leads me into my next point, which is that you may also just encounter a lot of like power struggles during this transit. And this might not even have anything to do with like you as a person. You could just experience power struggles in your life, like in like your work environment maybe, or in like a friendship. It could be random, and it can feel like you are like losing control at the same time. And if you are really encountering a lot of like power and control issues, my advice would be to try to just like take a step back and like kind of release your need to control every outcome while this transit is happening. Because I feel like the best way to work with Pluto's energy is to just kind of like ride the wave, and just know that like there's going to be ups and downs, there's going to be highs, there's going to be some really low lows, but it's all going to eventually even out. You know, it's gonna even, the storm is gonna pass. And I think Pluto is inviting you to be more comfortable not needing to have like full control over everything, if that's something that you struggle with in your daily life. Let's talk a little bit about, well, actually, just one more thing I want to mention. Like during this transit, you may feel like your life is ending. Like you could and I'm not I'm not trying to be dramatic, but you could genuinely just feel like your life is over. Like you could just face these struggles, these things that seem to be happening like to you, like even out of your control, and you might just feel so defeated, and you might just feel so overwhelmed while this transit is happening. You might feel really like broken down. And I just want to hold space for that and for you if you're experiencing that, because it's real. It's really, really intense. And just know that when you do come out of this transit, when you make it through, you are a survivor. You are incredibly strong for getting through this transit. Let's talk a little bit about some of the outcomes, or how you might be feeling towards the end of this transit. You might walk away from this transit with a sense of purity that you didn't have before. And when I say purity, I just mean you're gonna feel like you know the truth of a lot. Like you know the truth of yourself. You've confronted your shadow. You probably even know the truth more about your surroundings and about others. And so when you have this sense of alignment with the truth of your life, and the falsehoods have been stripped away, anything built on a false foundation has been shed, you can feel a sense of just truth in your life. You can feel a sense of purity of spirit, and that can be a really nice gift, and it can be something to feel proud about. It can be something to feel good about, and not everybody is given that opportunity to align their life in such like an honest way, in such a pure way. And you also might notice that the people around you can sense like a purity to you, an authenticity to you that they may not have sensed before the transit. Another thing that you can walk away with is a sense of like inner power, a sense of authority in your life. Because again, to confront your shadow, to confront so many falsehoods, to get to the truth of your life, and to survive this transit, it really is a powerful thing. It really is something to pat yourself on the back for. And you might just feel more confident about everything moving forward. You might feel like you have an unbreakable spirit. You might feel a sense of authority and agency in your life that you really didn't have before. And then you may also feel a lot more aligned and clear about your highest path, or your highest timeline, and the most aligned next steps for you in your life. Again, this is because Pluto will strip away anything that is not in alignment with you. So if you have a job that you just don't like, and Pluto has a way of removing that from your life, you're free to move forward in a more aligned way. And you might also pick up some hobbies or passions during this transit, so I would definitely pay attention to what you are drawn to during this transit. What speaks to your soul, what excites you during this transit. You may uncover things about yourself and your passions that you had no idea about before. You may learn that you're really interested in a field of study that you didn't know before. So it's kind of cool, and I would definitely pay attention to things that come into your life during this transit that really light you up, that really excite you, that really give you a sense of like purpose, and that feel very aligned. And then after this transit, you can move forward with all these insights and build your dream life. Okay, and then that's kind of just overall what to expect. And then I wanted to just give a little bit of advice, because I think it can be helpful to just have some advice to make the most of this transit. So the first piece of advice is just to, if you feel called to just try to like learn a lot about this transit, and try to remind yourself periodically that this is happening for you. Because you might forget that this is going on, and then it could lead you to, you know, making decisions that you maybe wouldn't have if you remembered, okay, I'm in the middle of a Pluto conjunct Sun transit. Also, try to just remind yourself that this is temporary. This is not going to last forever. And before you know it, it will pass. So if you're feeling really defeated, yeah, it's not going to last forever. I would also recommend figuring out the exact dates that you're going to have this transit. So 2 things: figure out the exact dates that Pluto will be like actually on that point in your chart. And then Pluto obviously moves incredibly slowly, but it also retrogrades quite often. So chances are you're going to experience this like at the exact degree, and that's when it's going to be the most intense. And there's going to be a period of time between 2 dates where it's exact, where Pluto is right there on your natal Sun position. But then Pluto will slowly start to move away, and then it'll actually come back, and it can hit that exact point again for a period of time. So I would encourage you to write down the dates where Pluto is going to be right on your natal Sun, and have those dates in the back of your mind. But I would also encourage you to spread it out a little bit more, and give yourself, like, you know, Pluto being within a couple degrees of your Sun before and after, because chances are you will still feel some effects of the transit, even if Pluto isn't right exactly on your natal Sun. If it's a couple of degrees before and a couple of degrees after, chances are you will still feel this transit happening. I would also encourage you, if you're open to it, to consider some kind of like therapy or healing modality during this time. It can be helpful to have like a rock or like a pillar, or just a very trusted guide or professional who can kind of create a safe space for you to explore a lot of the ups and downs, and just to provide a little bit of support. But be sure that it's a person who you really connect with and who you trust, and somebody who is going to just like provide a safe space to like validate you, not necessarily, you know, tell you what to do or anything like that. And if you're not open to therapy, you could also try something like life coaching, or you could even just try to get, you know, some kind of astrology reading done or something like that. But those kinds of things could potentially be helpful during this transit. I would also recommend keeping a journal, even if you don't journal every day. Just writing down like what's going on, because this transit can be very, very tumultuous. Like you could just have a lot happen during this transit. Like just so much could happen. And it can be helpful to kind of just keep track of, you know, okay, this is happening, this happened to me then, and also just to like see the change and just to kind of watch the transformation can be interesting. And finally, if you're really having a hard time, you can just try to reframe this transit as an opportunity, or even like a blessing, even though it really doesn't always feel like that in the moment. It really can be a divine blessing. And if you feel out of control, just know that there is, you know, a higher power that is sort of orchestrating this for you on your behalf. And I also just wanted to mention that it can be helpful to see what house this is happening for you in your chart. So for example, if you have this transit happening in your first house, so if you have your natal sun in your first house, and then Pluto is currently on that spot in your first house, Pluto's transiting your first house, that will give you even more insight into the area of your life where all of this radical transformation is happening. And with the first house, that would be your physical identity, like your body, your appearance, your personality. But if it's the fourth house, that's your childhood, your home, your roots. So that would be a totally different story. So that can just add a whole nother layer of insight into exactly like what is going to be like transforming for you so radically. And I like to use the Placidus house system because personally I find that to be the most accurate for me. But everybody has their own preference. And if you are going through this and you would like a little bit more support or insight or guidance, it can be about astrology or just life in general, I have a list of offerings on my website. I do readings and I do alignment calls, and it's just a safe space to talk and just, you know, figure out ways for you to move forward with more alignment and self-love, basically. So I really hope that this was helpful for you, and I really wish you all of the best with this transit. I'm excited for you, and I feel for you if you're having a hard time at any point of it. Yeah, I hope this was helpful, and feel free to check out some of my other videos, and I also have some writings on my website if you'd like some more insight into astrology and just healing in general.